Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The manhwa starts with someone banging pots and pans to wake people up at a camp. We see a man in bed that doesn't want to get up, and another man saying there's something in his boot, and that it's a bug. This wakes the other guy up, and we learn his name is Incrid. These people are his squad members. He says after causing trouble he was demoted to this position. On the battlefield, we hear the commander say to attack. Incrid says he doesn't have any special powers, he got here with endless training. We see him block a hit, then returns with a kick. But another soldier tackles him, and starts to repeatedly punch him, but the enemy gets his head cut off by a friendly. Incrid says he actually has no talent, he grabs his sword and begins to run saying his dreams are too far to reach. An arrow flies in, doming a soldier beside him. Incrid sees this and is glad it wasn't him, but when he looks forward he sees a man charging at him. Incrid grips his sword, saying he will become a knight. But he gets stabbed in the chest, but he says his dream was just worn out, as he starts to bleed out. He falls to his knees, and starts to lose consciousness. He says that he didn't even know that his death would be so pathetic. He hears the sound of a fire being lit, and he opens his heavy eyes, but it's blurry, and we see ripples below him. The banging is heard again, and he opens his eyes and the man from before says there's something in his boot, and freaks out again because it's a bug. Incrid wonders if he's just feeling deja vu. He's back in the battle, and turns to see a blade flying at him. He gets stabbed in the throat. Saying it's his second time, then he dies for the third time, and the same guy stabs him making it his fourth time. He gets woken up again to the pots and pans, and grabs his throat to make sure it's okay. He's sent to battle again, and turns to see the soldier who has been killing him repeatedly. The soldier lunges forward. Incrid says that he cannot escape this hell. It jumps to the soldier once more lunging, and Incrid says he's seen it 17 times now. He closes his eyes and accepts his fate, saying this is his 17th death. And he wishes he put more effort into his sword. The soldier begins to walk away, leaving Incrid in a pool of his own blood. As he lays full of regret, we see a blue lantern swinging, and a voice asks him if he truly believes that. As it's none other than the boatman to the other side. The boatman says to feel it properly, and give up, saying he needs to despair at the wall he cannot cross. But Incrid wants no part of that, as his eyes are full of resolve. The familiar pots and pans clang again. The tattooed man says he's surprised Incrid woke up so early. We finally learn his name is Rem, and Incrid tells him about the bug in his boot. Rem looks inside of it, and dumps the bug out. Then stomps it, asking if he put it in there. He says he watched it crawl in earlier. This is his 18th time seeing that corpse. He wonders how many times he'll have to see it before he can move on from this day. Incrid says he's wielded a sword since he was young. He learned swordsmanship from a retired mercenary who came to his village. We see the one-legged mercenary, telling Incrid that if he's this good, he might actually become a knight one day. These words heavily influenced Incrid, and that helped him dream of becoming a knight who can slay 1,000 people by himself. He began to grin at the thought of it. He thought he was the protagonist of a bard's song. It cuts to a bar, with people laughing, making fun of Incrid asking how he can be a knight when he's scared of a dog. Incrid realized that his talent is nothing special, but he refused to give up, as hard work won't betray him. He believed that with enough time and enough effort he would be able to overcome that wall known as talent. We see him stabbing a monster with his blade, and he says he's started to be acknowledged by those around him. He's actually becoming stronger, but that hope was shattered when he was stabbed after a child from the village he was staying in requested a duel, and won. The kid was 12 and had only been learning swordsmanship for 6 months. The man who spent over a decade wielding a sword, lost to a mere child. Incrid really wondered if that was the end for him, but he took his anger and used it as fuel to continue training to achieve his goal of becoming a knight. He would skip out on eating and sleeping to train, continuously swinging at a tree to practice during his free time. He puts his all into one of his swings, causing his sword to vibrate from hitting the tree. He is gassed out and looks up at his effort, to see the marks he left behind on the tree. He says even if he can't become a knight, he lifts his sword up, and swings again saying he will at least become an experienced soldier. He screams out of frustration, and continued to practice his swings. 3 years later he heads to the Cyprus division. He became the squad leader of a second-rate squad. The best position he could achieve after his endless training. He calls out to one of his men named Jackson, who asks what he wants. Incrid tells him to do his morning rotation for him. Jackson says alright, and just to repay him next time. Rem says that Jackson is like a wild cat, and all he does is glare. Incrid calls out to him, and Rem asks if he's going to push work onto him too. Ingrid says he'd like to learn the heart of the beast. Rem looks taken aback, saying he gave up last time, asking if he thinks it'll work this time. Then the battle began, which Ingrid was killed in, and continuously died off spawn, even though he's learned the heart of the beast every time he wakes up. He can only watch as the blade pierces him. He says today for sure will be different. The soldiers start to roar before charging in. Ingrid says it's now his 21st time here on the battlefield. He's memorized the situation. He dodges the spear, then blocks an attack from behind. Then turns to see another squad member named Vel, screaming. Ingrid says he'll die soon, and an arrow flies in, but Ingrid blocks it. Vel wonders what happened, and another man goes to attack him, but Ingrid cuts the man down. He says he completed his first goal for today. All that's left now is the soldier that is continuously killing him. The soldier draws his blade out of the enemy he cut down, then glares at Ingrid. He slowly walks towards him, but Ingrid is ready for this. The soldier lunges in at him like usual, and Ingrid recalls Rem saying he always closes his eyes during danger, then swings his axe at Ingrid's face, and Ingrid flinches, closing his eyes. Rem says he needs to be brave, and not to be agitated or taken aback, and that he must become someone who doesn't even fear death, just like a beast, that is truly the heart of the beast. Ingrid doesn't even blink as the sword flies at him. He says that he isn't afraid of death, as death only makes him stronger. He avoids the thrust for the first time ever. He keeps his eye on the sword and his heart begins to pound like crazy. Since he avoided the attack that's always killed him, he and the soldier stare at each other. Then both start to go in for an attack, but the other soldier is way faster, stabbing his blade into Ingrid's throat. Ingrid's eyes begin to see the underworld, as he begins to bleed out profusely. He hears the boatman. Ingrid sees the boatman approach him, and the boatman says to give up and get on the boat, acknowledge your weakness and be at ease. Ingrid says no, the day he gives up will never happen. He finally saw the tip of his sword, and dodged it. After waking up, Rem says he woke up early. Ingrid is now on his 22nd life, saying he'll challenge it again. It jumps to the midst of the battle again, and Ingrid has jumped to his 33rd life. He dodges the thrust once more, and as the soldier turns to continue, Ingrid dodges, but it's too slow as his throat gets sliced, causing him to drop to his knees. We see he has a necklace that falls off him, and Ingrid says that in his time as a mercenary, he subjugated quite a few monsters. He took the request from a random village who asked for help. He helped since he wants to be a knight, and protecting the weak is a knight's duty. The elder of the village says they are poor, and hands him something. He looks down to see that it's a charm. It was a laughable reward for risking his life, but the elder said it would grant whatever he desperately wished for. He wonders if this is the reason he is having a Groundhog Day. The soldier who stabbed him says he must be in pain, and raises his sword saying he'll grant him mercy. Ingrid says mercy my ass, as the soldier is enjoying the pleasure of killing him. He executes him, and the pots and pans clang again. He tells Rem he put a bug into his boot, and Rem asks if he's lost his mind to be doing this so early in the day. Ingrid tells him to stop yelling and come outside, as he wants to learn the heart of the beast. Rem swings his axe, and Ingrid keeps his eyes on it, dodging the swing. Rem is confused, asking how he stopped flinching all of a sudden. He tells him he trained, and Rem says it's not something that can happen so quickly, and there's no way his family technique was taught by someone else. Ingrid tells him that he learned it by chance. Ingrid grabs some weapons, saying that he would like to spar with him. Rem stares at him, then smiles saying that sounds great. Rem swings at him, and he avoids it. This continues, and Rem asks him how long he's planning on dodging. While charging in, he dodges another attack, and Ingrid says the only sword techniques he possesses is the Valen mercenary sword technique. It's often called a petty trick. Ingrid starts to lose his balance, and Rem leaps at him. Ingrid gets his balance back, and readies himself for the leaping Rem. Rem notices this, and just like how the soldier he is always fighting, he thrusts his sword at Rem, but Rem knocks the blade out of his hands. The sword slides across the field, and Ingrid says even if it's just for a moment, he imitated that bastard's stab. He says his body remembers the technique. Rem says that it should have made him bleed. And among all of the techniques he's shown until now, that stab was pretty decent, and he tries to give him some tips on how to make it better. Rem says that if he doubts himself too much, it'll lead to nothing good. He says that he should start worrying about what comes next, rather than doubt himself. That is how he won't lose the grip on his sword, but in his own broken words. Ingrid looks at him, and says even though Rem explained it poorly he understood everything he meant. The difference between his stab and the soldier's is that Incred lacked confidence in his sword. The soldier kills him once more, saying he'll show him mercy, stabbing him again. Back to Incred, he's training with Rem, who knocks the sword away again. The soldier kills Incred yet again, and he instantly goes back to training with Rem. Incred says he will repeat this vicious cycle, taking it one step at a time, or even baby steps if he has to. He dies once more, and we learn he is on his 111th life, yet it still wasn't enough, as he died again, jumping to his 123rd life, to be greeted by the sword to his throat again. In the next life, we see him shouting while swinging at Rem, and he actually manages to push Rem's axe back, using the thrust he's been killed by. Rem asks if he's crazy. We see that Incred's hand begins to bleed. Rem says that his hand is gushing with blood. He asks him why he's laughing like a madman. But Incred feels nothing but excitement, as he mastered the stab. He's back on the battlefield, fighting his mortal enemy. He thrusts towards the soldier. Now that he's mastered the technique, it grazes against the soldier's helmet. As the soldier also went for a stab, but lands it in Incred's throat. Incred says his first stab trade was a failure, but he refused to blink or let go of his blade. He falls to the floor, blade in hand. The soldier puts his foot on his chest, and is smiling, saying he looks like he's suffering. And repeats his line of he'll show him mercy. Incred says that tomorrow, he will kill him tomorrow. The soldier laughs, saying there's no tomorrow for the dead, executing him. The bug from Rem's shoe tries to get away, but Incred stomps it out, saying he saw it fly in. Rem thanks him, and Incred says if he's thankful to take his guard duty. Rem wonders why he's being ordered so casually. We finally meet a new member called Big Eyes. Incred tells him to get him a shield, armor and a dagger, and he'll pay him later. Big Eyes is surprised, but says that he'll only trust him since he's his boss. Rem asks if he's ever been this pushy with his commands. Jackson says that they've always pushed their tasks onto him, and more members appear. Rem says that he's really acting weird today, as Incred is usually not this tense. He's back to practicing on the tree. Incred says he's felt an incredible amount of pain with every death. He wonders what'll happen if he doesn't win even after tens of thousands of times. He wonders what if he can find a way to escape and survive. He wonders if he were to escape if he'd wake up to tomorrow, or still repeat this day. He wonders if he could be content with the strength he's gained. But says he needs to stop being a bitch. He won't ever give up. He will overcome this wall to see what is on the other side. He thrusts the tree again, and again, saying he won't abandon this blessing of being able to repeat his life. He splits the tree in half. He starts to put on all of his equipment, readying himself for the fight as he truly believes he will win today. The horn of war is blown, and Incred's squad starts to walk into the fight behind him. The war begins. Incred says that the only reason he gets as far as he does in this war is due to luck, preparation and keeping himself a cool head. We see a man coming at him from behind. He blocks the hit, cutting the dude's head off. Another soldier goes for his leg, but the shin guard blocks it, and he bashes his skull in. Another one throws the axe from behind him, and he dodges, throwing his own weapon at the man. He says this is only all possible due to the repeated lives he's spent here. He sees Vel screaming, and he blocks the arrow for him like before. Then kills the other attacker. Now it is time for him to face his wall. The soldier glares at him. He has a WWE stare down with the soldier, and the soldier charges at him. Incred blocks it, but it shatters his shield. He throws the shield away, heading straight in, blocking the next attack with his sword. Incred says that the soldier is a regular guy, close to being a prodigy, but lacks real experience. So is easily surprised. Incred headbutts him. So the Valen sword technique with its many tricks is effective. Incred gets some dirt on his boot, then throws it into the soldier's eyes. While he's panicked, Incred leaps at him. The soldier sees this, and thrusts towards him. Incred dodges the blade. The soldier lands after missing, and turns instantly to prepare for the follow-up. But Incred does too, saying he knows now everything there is to know about this stab. Incred attacks the blade, shattering it to pieces. We see an archer draw his bow back, and unleash it, soaring across the battlefield. The soldier lets go of his shattered blade, as Incred goes in for the kill. He says he's won, but the arrow from before begins to fly in. As it gets close, it's broken by an axe throw, as the soldier is stabbed in the throat. Rem is the one who blocked the arrow, saying he's going to destroy the archer, but Jackson tells him not to waste his energy. The soldier starts to fall down, but has a look of disbelief on his face. He looks at the battlefield, and drops to his knees. Incred pants, and looks down to see the soldier shaking in fear. Incrid readies his sword, saying that this is mercy, and cuts the head off of the soldier. Smiles just as it's happened to him. He has finally shattered the wall he couldn't surpass. But gets kicked in the back, by a man we'll call Ponytail. Incrid grunts in pain, and Rem starts to run and saying that it's a frog. We see Ponytail is actually a frogman. While Incrid is in pain, Ponytail says he's invested a lot into the soldier. He can't believe he was defeated. Soldier's nickname will now be Pervert. Ponytail says to die, while swinging his weapon. But we see the axe block it, as Rem is pulled up to help. He swings his axe down, but gets blocked. They both lean in and start to trade blow for blow. Another soldier goes to kill Incrid. But Jackson leaps in, cutting his head off. Rem creates distance, as does Ponytail. They have a standstill, and Rem says if he wants to kill his squad leader he needs his permission first. Ponytail asks how the weakling is commander. Rather than Rem explains to us that frogs are a race born to fight, and he'll either have to burn it with magic or kill it with one strike. Ponytail looks at Rem, wondering why he's on such a small battlefield, saying he'd have to risk his life to kill him. Then says it isn't worth it, and stands up straight. Then walks away. Rem calls him a coward. Jackson runs while carrying Incrid, and Rem helps block the soldier in front of him. Another soldier goes to follow up, but another party member stops him. A whole row of soldiers drop, as another one of the boys pull up too. Incrid's vision is blurred, and their allied force say to retreat. He closes his eyes while they all retreat. He plops back into the underworld, as the boatman says that he's managed to survive another day, but that's it. He won't be able to withstand the walls that keep appearing in his way. Giving up and falling into despair is his fate. Incrid starts to get up. We see the wall behind him, and he tells the boatman that the walls exist for him to overcome them. The boatman smiles, saying he awaits the day those eyes, which are filled with greed and ambition, lose their light completely. Incrid wakes up bandaged, and Rem says he is in the infirmary tent, and that he slept for 2 days straight. He tells him he saved him from the frog. Incrid is confused, and says if it was a frog he's amazed he survived. Rem asks if he remembers him, saying he's his bestest friend. Incrid says he never said they were friends, and calls him a noble hunter. Rem covers his mouth quickly, and looks around to see if anyone heard him. Rem says he can't just blurt out the secrets of others he has nothing to do with. Incrid says he thought they were best friends. But he realizes he's made it beyond that day. We learn Big Eye's name is actually Craze, saying he owes him triple what he spent. Incrid was wondering why he was here, and says that he wasn't anywhere to be found in the battle. Craze smiles, saying he'll take double as a discount. Jackson also comes to the infirmary. Incrid asks what business he has with him. Jackson throws something at him, saying to apply it in the morning and the evening. Incrid says that Jackson hates sharing personal items, yet he did it anyway. We learn the tall monk's name is Odon, and he's crying while praying. Incrid tells him he's still alive, and to go. That night he wonders why they are all taking shifts. He wonders if they are worried about him. Then another member comes in. He's surprised to see Incrid, asking why he's in here. His name is Ragna. He quickly leaves, and Incrid says there's no way he's worried, as Ragna is very carefree. Besides him, there are 2 soldiers in the infirmary. One is a platoon commander who always picks fights with him, and the other is a soldier he doesn't know, that just blankly stares into space. Incrid wonders why he's here. Then they hear footsteps outside, and all turn to see a long-haired elf woman entering the tent. She asks who the 444th Squad commander is. Incrid is confused. The other platoon commander calls her a fairy. She asks him what group he is with. He says his name is Vengeance. He is the 3rd platoon commander of the 2nd company. She asks if his company taught him to state others' races when he meets them. He apologizes, and Incrid says she must be the new commander of the 4th company. Incrid says he's the commander she's looking for. She says she's heard he's leading his difficult squad members well. She looks forward to his contributions. He's surprised she came here just to say all of that. As she goes to leave, she asks for the young soldier's name. He says Krang, but says it suspiciously. Incrid wonders if he just made it up, saying his attitude is also bad. He wonders if he's a noble. The commander gives him one last look, then walks away. Incrid wonders what's going on. Later on he says most of the pain is gone, and wonders if he should start training now. Vengeance asks where he's going, and he says the training area. Vengeance calls him an idiot, saying he's trying to act tough when he's the lowest ranking soldier. The noble man says nothing. Incrid says he needs to recall the past battle. He spent a lot of money to learn how to do it when he was young. Incrid wonders what if the last attack he did failed. saying it isn't good to put all of his eggs into one basket. He makes some analogy about Rem's attacks all being lethal. Then the noble from the infirmary says he's working hard. Ingrid is caught off guard, and he says that he doesn't know what he's doing, but his hands kept twitching in the barracks and now he's spacing out. Ingrid says he was training his grip, and he's currently recalling the battle. The man asks why he's doing that. Ingrid says so he doesn't get killed. The noble asks if he plans to become something by preserving his life. Ingrid doesn't want to say it, since people laugh at his dream. He looks up, raises his sword up saying he wishes to become a knight. The nobleman is surprised by this and Ingrid says it's the first time that someone didn't laugh at his dream. He says he forgot too, and he suddenly remembered something. He understood what he needs to do. Ingrid watches him leave, and the man says if he becomes a knight to remember his name. Back at the camp, we see a bard playing to soldiers, and they are talking about Cyprus, the hero of the battlefield. Vengeance wonders where his morning rations are, asking if they are planning to serve them nothing. Ingrid decided to walk instead of heading to the training area, and Jackson asks him how his injuries are. He tells him the medicine worked well, thanking him. Jackson says if he's thankful, to hurry and come back. That night the nobleman tells him good night, and Ingrid says it back to him. Vengeance wants nothing to do with it. Ingrid says it was a day of doing nothing. He hears the bard again, and wonders if the bard came this morning too. But Vengeance says the same thing about the morning rations. Then he realizes what this means. He jolts out of bed saying it can't be. But Jackson asks about his injuries again. Ingrid tells him the same thing as before, only to get the same reply from Jackson. Cementing the fact he's in a loop again, he recalls the boatman telling him about the next wall. He wonders if he died in his sleep without noticing. He says it feels worse than dying in the battlefield, but it makes him more determined, as he was given another challenge. That night again, he wonders who killed him and why, saying the only person capable of getting in would be a knight. He says it must be an assassin, and they have to be among us. He recalls the commander saying that a fairy is light and nimble, perfect for assassinations. He wonders if she came here to figure out the location beforehand. He says he needs to confirm IIT, and there's only one entrance at the barracks. He can just scream to wake others up when he sees her. So he just needs to wait for the assassin, but a needle goes into his throat. He turns and says he didn't even see them coming in. He starts to grunt due to the pain, and falls out of bed. He says it's a numbing poison. He sees Vengeance also has one in his throat, and someone stands before Krang. He sees the assassin, and they raise their blade in front of Krang, stabbing him in the chest, killing him instantly. Another person stabs their way into the tent. He says it's another assassin. He looks up to see the commander girl, saying it really was her. And that it's the fourth company leader. He wakes up to the sound of the bard again, saying it's his third time now, and he wasn't even able to detect their presence, so it won't be easy. Plus the company leader, even if he stops the assassin, fighting her after is not possible. He says he feels helpless. He felt the same way a few days ago when he fought Pervert. But in the end he was able to overcome it, killing him. So as long as he doesn't give up, he will find a way to win again. He rips the covers off of Vengeance, and he says he's acting crazy. Ingrid says that he was wrong assuming they were in the base, and he should be wary of outside. Vengeance mocks him, asking if today's training is catching cockroaches. But he says he guesses that's fitting for a lowlife. Ingrid says he's glad he cares about him so much, annoying Vengeance, who says he was being sarcastic. Ingrid sighs, saying he was too. Krang asks if they are arguing again, and says maybe he'll come back later. Ingrid tells him it's fine, and Vengeance lays back down. He says that Krang is definitely the real target, and wonders who he really is, saying he's suspicious. But he doesn't plan to dig into Krang's past, if he doesn't want to talk about it / just like his squad members. But he was involved so he goes for it. He asks him what he is. Krang is taken aback, and Ingrid wonders if he phrased it wrong. Krang says well that isn't something he can tell him. Ingrid asks why not, and Krang says it's a long story. Ingrid waits a second, then says that makes sense. Vengeance starts to flip out, asking why he's accepting such a shitty answer, and if he was going to accept it regardless, why even ask? He says that Krang is definitely not from this country considering his manners, and asks which country's spy he is. Krang stares at him, and Vengeance shuts up. Krang walks to him, saying he is not, and will not betray the kingdom. Ingrid says he can see from his eyes and his movements, that Krang has a knight-like aura. Vengeance asks if that's any way to talk to a higher up. Krang laughs, and Ingrid says that he definitely isn't a knight, since he was also powerless in the face of the assassin. However, he is truly hiding something. That night they tell each other goodnight again, and Vengeance clears his throat to acknowledge them. Incred wonders if it's because he's scared of Krang. He looks at the tent entrance, saying that if assassins barge in they would all die. He sits up out of bed, and Vengeance asks him what he's doing instead of sleeping. Incred says that assassins are going to invade soon, and to cooperate if he wants to live. Vengeance gives him a gross stare, and says he's lost his damn mind. Krang smiles at the situation, and Incred says that's the reaction he expected. But here's a voice asking how he knew. A poison needle flies through the tent wall, cutting his throat. Incred wonders when the hell they got in, and reaches for his sword. The assassin flies in, killing Vengeance, and stabbing Krang in the chest, and Incred drops dead. He wakes up, now to the 4th time, saying that since he has no evidence, he can't get their help with the assassins. He decides to tell the higher-ups, and one of them tells him to shut up and leave. Incred decides to predict when they'll enter, and to scream. The wind blows the curtain entrance, and he wonders if it's now or not. He says now, and screams assassin, but gets stabbed in the throat. They pull their blade out, causing him to bleed profusely. They then run through the front door, and it jumps to him saying he has to ambush them before they can do anything. Though how is he meant to fight back against an enemy that he cannot even see? The next life he's standing guard inside the tent again, and they come up from behind and stab his throat again. He realizes he can't do anything if he doesn't avoid their poison needles. He wakes up, now for the 20th loop, and he says he still can't do shit against them. He starts to think, then smirks saying he's only died 20 times. He needs a way to avoid the poison needle first. He sees Jackson sitting down, and walks up to him while he's cleaning his dagger, and says this is the key. He asks Rem why he calls Jackson a perverted wildcat, and Rem says that's because he's a damn pervert. He always stabs people in the back and runs off, saying it's just like a cunning wildcat. Jackson sees Incred, asking if his injuries are okay, and he says that Jackson would surely win against the assassins, but he can't take him with him, since he has no authority, and that it's a wall he must overcome by himself after all. He calls out to Jackson, asking him what he would have to do in order to stop himself from being assassinated. Jackson thinks for a second, and says he's not sure, since nobody has survived any of his ambushes, making Incred realize he's found the right guy to help. He then asks Jackson if someone like him were to stab him in the back, what would he have to do in order to stop it? Jackson thinks about it, saying he's not sure as nobody has ever survived. Incred's face still looks determined. Jackson thinks about it, and then lets out a long sigh, saying that he needs eyes on the back of his head. Incred wonders what that means, and asks him. Jackson says perfect timing, asking if he sees the wagon behind him. Incred asks where, and Jackson says behind the tents. Incred wonders how Jackson noticed something so far away, asking if he really does have eyes on the back of his head. Jackson tells him that it's going to fall apart, and then on cue, we see the will pop off, and it falls over. Incred is surprised, asking him if he's a prophet, but Jackson says he just has spent too much time with that barbarian. Incred tells him to stop kidding around, asking him how he knew. Jackson points to his ear, saying sound. He heard creaking from the wagon's axle. If you can hear what's around you, you can predict what's going to happen next. Incred is surprised that he heard something so quiet as he didn't even hear the wagon itself. Jackson says basically you don't need to see to sense what's around you, and you can keep trying to listen to what's around you to practice, hone his senses, and isolate the sounds. Incred says that was a nice explanation, and before he would be too lazy to even reply to him. Jackson says that's just how he is, but it's better to do this than have him on his heels, and nowadays it seems like he's too determined to give up. That night, we see Incred in bed, saying that he's come across his second wall now in the form of faceless death. He can live if he can sense them. We see him focusing on his ears, and he hears the footsteps of the patrol along with the sound of torches outside. We see the assassin flying in, but Incred has not heard him yet, and wonders where it is. We see the assassin landing, but Incred still has not sensed him. The assassin vanishes, and then a needle quickly goes into Incred's throat. He opens his eyes, saying of course he failed. He wakes up the next morning to the same chant about Cyprus. He says he has not taken a single step forward, but his body remembers everything, such as the experience of loaning, the heart of the beast, and the stab. Jackson tells him that he can gain a lot of information from sound. You can tell the location of something based on the intensity and direction of the sound, and once you're able to hear faint, far away sounds, at that point, your ears might as well be a second pair of eyes. Jackson snaps his finger, explaining how sound is a wave, and the wave rings out in all directions, no matter how silent it is. In the chaos of thousands of sound waves mixed together, he needs to isolate one single wave. Ingrid starts to overhear everybody's conversations, thinking about how all the sound is entangled, and that he needs to isolate and categorize them. He says all the flags sound like one large one to him, and tries to remember how many there are, and then starts to focus on the footsteps close to him, and to really feel the sound around him, focusing on the familiar ones first, followed by the unfamiliar ones. We hear Krang say Enchi, and Ingrid opens his eyes as Krang asks him what kind of training this is. Ingrid asks about the nickname, and Krang says that it should be fine since it's just short for his name. Ingrid says he's not a fan, but if that's what he wants to do, that's okay, and then asks what part of this looks like training since he's just sitting here like an idiot. Krang says that he already knows that he is not somebody who wastes time. Back tonight, we see a needle flying in, and again, it hits Ingrid in the throat. He glances over to see Krang getting stabbed in the stomach. Then the assassin goes in for round 2, causing Krang to spit out blood. We learn that he is now in the 33rd loop of this, and again on the 34th, he did not hear anything as well, which led to another failure as Krang died. This repeated over and over again. We see him sitting there, focusing again on trying to listen to the sounds, and he explains that he does not need more experience to overcome this wall. There's no sudden realization or divine intervention. He just needs to repeatedly do this over and over and over until he can hear the sound of the bird. We see a bird landing atop a flag, he hears it, so it means the assassin's footsteps should be able to be heard as well. He opens his eyes to Krang, who says that he's surprised he snuck up on him, yet he knew he was here, and says that since his eyes are closed, he must be training his perception, and repeats the words that he knows he's not somebody who wastes his time after all. We see that Ingrid's eyes have a different feel than usual to them. It jumps to the assassin raising his shoulder and throwing the needle towards Ingrid's throat. He then avoids it and reaches for his blade under his pillow and swings at the assassin, which makes him fall over out of sheer panic. The man begins to sweat nervously, and Ingrid smiles, saying that he's no longer a faceless death. The assassin starts to grit his teeth, and attacks back at Ingrid, calling him a rat. Ingrid realizes that he's not as good in combat as the pervert, so he can easily handle him. He looks over, wondering about the others, and he sees Vengeance has a needle in his throat, but Krang is still okay. The assassin comes in, and Ingrid dodges it, saying he shouldn't let his guard down because he's still an experienced assassin. The assassin then throws a dagger towards him. Ingrid narrowly dodges, but it still cuts his chest open. The assassin doesn't want to miss the chance, so he runs in towards Ingrid. We see the tent get cut open, and Ingrid looks over, seeing the ferry company commander, and realizes that if he doesn't stab first, he'll die, so he thrusts towards her. The assassin then yells about him having a guard, and throws out a ton of poison needles towards them all. He turns around, but it's too late to react as they fly towards Krang as well. We see the company commander leap over Ingrid's attack, and use her cape to block all of the poison needles from hitting Krang. Ingrid says he thought she was an assassin, but she actually came to protect him, but regardless, now it is his chance. He lowers himself to the ground, and leaps forward towards the assassin. The assassin tries to block it, and we see the attack knock his hands away. The assassin grits his teeth, and tries his best to run, realizing that he needs to get out of here. Ingrid doesn't chase him, and says he can't believe he'd run away like that. Krang sits up, saying that he was probably after him. Ingrid says he knows, and Krang asks how. Ingrid says there's nobody who'd pay an assassin to kill a boot like him or Vengeance. The company commander says exactly, and tells him that he's fast on his feet. While reaching for her sword, Ingrid realizes that even if she was an ally just now, she can't let what happened here slip out, and she doesn't plan to leave any witnesses. Ingrid tightens the grip on his blade, and then Krang steps in front of them both, saying that he has a favor to ask her as he does not want anybody to die today. Ingrid wonders what's going on, as we see her bowing, saying as he wishes. Krang says that includes Vengeance, and that he isn't dead yet. The company commander says that they have an antidote, so he should be fine. Ingrid realizes that she is knowledgeable in poison if she could tell what it was at first glance. Krang thinks about it, saying they need to clean up this mess, and it's going to be a bother if people find out that an assassin has been here. Ingrid asks if it's fine as long as there are no traces left, and looks over at a fire, saying that there's actually an easy way as we see their tent set up in blaze. Soldiers from all around start running over with buckets of water, saying there's a fire in the tent, and that there are 2 survivors as we see Ingrid and Vengeance. Ingrid says with this, the traces of the assassin have been removed, and that they will take care of the rest. It jumps to a bird soaring in the night sky, as we see Krang and the company commander. She says that if Ingrid didn't slow the assassin down, Krang would be dead, and she asks if he changed his mind due to that. Krang says yes, asking if she agrees that he is interesting, but she does not answer, and just looks away. Krang says he's been trying to avoid it, and he recalls how hard Incred would work in the mornings, and smiles, saying that he has rubbed off on him, and that they'll meet again in their respective roles. We see a scythe as it is coming out of the water, and then it quickly dissolves as he sees the boatman. The boatman tells him that he'll see him again, and Incred says anytime. He says that he survived against the second wall, and woke up the next day. He can sense the presence of most things, yet he could not sense the company commander, and he has a lot to do when he gets back. Incred says thankfully he wasn't hurt, so he can return immediately. Vengeance asks him if he saved him from the fire, and asks him why. Incred wonders why he's giving him shit for saving him, and why he dislikes him so much. He simply tells him it's because they're comrades, and he doesn't need another reason. Vengeance looks off to the side, a bit guilty, and says even after all the shit he's put him through, he's very selfless, and he asks if he's returning to his squad. Incred says yes, and Vengeance says he's shit out of luck as the vibe is going to be horrible out there. Incred asks what's going on, and Vengeance explains that there's a rumor going around that the entire base is cursed. We see somebody from Incred's squad calling out to Rem, calling him an underdeveloped monkey, and shoving him. Rem looks excited, and we see people running away, saying that the squad is fighting again. As we see him lift him into the air, and throw him into the table, breaking their shit. The man attacks back at Rem, but he avoids it, and then returns with a solid right to the face, and pulls out his axes, saying he'll decorate his skull with it. The man pulls his own sword out, saying that he's going to split him in half. Incred finally makes it there, and says he doesn't know about the base being cursed, but these bastards might as well be his curse, and he sighs, telling them all to stop it. We hear them say that they thought he died, and he says that he didn't, but he might go crazy because of them. 4 days have passed since Incred has gone back to his squad. We see him in bed, and he opens his eyes to Jackson standing above him. He said that he was trying to leave quietly, asking if he woke him up. Incred says no, and he's gonna wake up and work out anyway. Jackson says that he only started recently, but he's really good at listening already. Incred tells him that he's been practicing, and Jackson says to keep it up as it'll help him someday. Battles are far and few in between. With winter approaching, the best thing for him to do right now is to solely focus on training his body to the limit. As we see him doing one-armed pull-ups on a tree, we hear a man saying good morning to him, and Incred looks down at a rock, and underneath it is Odon. He asks if he's returning from his morning workout, saying that he is keeping busy. He drops the boulder and says this is good. We see him starting to stand up as he towers above Incred, and he says a well-trained body is a weapon in itself, and he should be able to even withstand a kick from a frog. But that he's too thin, so he needs to continue training. Incred says he's just excessively large, but he'll try it. Odon starts to talk about the training technique he told him before, and then we hear something going down in the tent beside them as we see Rem kicking the man that he was fighting earlier out of bed, saying that it's his duty, yet he's still asleep, calling him lazy. The man starts crawling towards his sword, grabbing onto it, and swings it, telling Rem to eat his ass. Rem starts to swing back, and Incred enters, asking why they're fighting again. Odon tells them that violence solves nothing. Rem explains that this dude is trying to starve them, and Incred says if it's his turn to start cooking, then to do it, and Ragna says okay. Rem tries handing him an apron, telling him there's no need to act like this if he's just going to do it anyway. Ragna slaps it away, saying that it reeks, and Rem starts sniffing it, saying that it smells good. Incred asks if he's bored since he's picking fights for no reason. Rem asks if it's that obvious, saying that the lack of battles is making him itch. Incred tells him not to take it out on randoms, and to come with him as he'll fight him. Later on in the day, we see him get kicked in the side, and Rem says he needs to take hits better as he comes in with his axe, knocking Incred's weapon out of the air. Incred keeps himself calm with the heart of the beast, and as Rem comes in with another attack, he deflects it, saying that he needs to utilize his hearing to block hits. He will continue what he learned while dying hundreds of times, and thrusts towards Rem's face. Rem avoids it, but it was still a good try nonetheless. Then he grabs onto his sword with his axe, using it to hold him there, and then grabs him by the collar, using his own momentum against him to push him into the floor, saying that he was expecting more since he improved so much recently. But asks what made him boring all of a sudden, saying he's seen the stab a lot now, asking if there's anything new. Incred starts to get back up, saying he knows that he's different now, and he can repeat everything hundreds of thousands of times. He glares at Rem, saying to try it again, and he'll destroy him this time. Rem starts to think to himself that even if his skills are really bad, he doesn't get sick of seeing how determined his eyes are. He smiles, saying that he can only say that after he's laid a scratch on him. It begins to rain, and they both look up, surprised as it came out of nowhere. Back inside their tents, Ingrid says that it starts and stops whenever it wants. Rem says that he's gonna start growing mushrooms on his feet at this rate. We see Ragna asleep, and Odon praying. Another man enters, asking how many times he's going to have to cancel his duels because of the rain, and he believes the curse rumors now. Ingrid asks what he's talking about, and the man asks if he didn't hear. Ingrid says that now that he thinks about it, Vengeance mentions something about it. The man says that the weather is weird, and that casualties are increasing, and they keep getting hurt, especially Jack, Bo, and Rotten, as they are all hurt. People are saying that they're cursed due to this, but he's sure they aren't cursed, and that the temperamental weather only added fuel to the rumor. Ingrid says that the higher-ups won't let something like this go unnoticed, and the man asks why he's doing it in the downpour, and Ingrid says that's exactly why. Rem asks if he's a stray cat and what purpose this would serve. Jackson tells him that it's a good idea, and to keep it up, and Rem looks at him, scoffs, and starts yelling, asking what he taught him, and when he started caring for the squad leader. As they start yelling, Odon says if he's looking for a way to train in the tent, there's some things he can do even while laying down. Ragna asks if he wants him to look at his stance again. Rem turns around, saying look at all these guys, and they all continue glaring. Jackson glances over while Odon smiles, and Ragna still just keeps staring at the back of Ingrid, and Rem says that he noticed. As we see Ingrid still looking outside the tent. It jumps to a war room, and a man is telling all the commanders to keep their soldiers in check. They should send out a scouting party before the winter again, and ask if anybody has suggestions to fill in the gaps. We see the ferry commander suggesting the 444th squad leader. The man instantly says that he's a little dumb, and that he'll probably hold the scouts back. She tries telling him that he could bring about unexpected results, and he asks why she thinks that, and she tells him that it's just a fairy's instinct. The next day, we see Ingrid talking to her, and he's asking her why he's being sent to the scouts, and she glares at him. It jumps back to the man from earlier asking Ingrid if he pissed off the company commander, and he asked what he could have done to do that, and he suggests that he did because there's no other reason for her to specifically pick him. He wonders if she's going to kill him now that Krang has left. Rem asked if he's really going, saying that he can help him get out of it while holding his axe. Ingrid says it's not like he can use that axe on a superior, and that he's not like Rem. Rem says that's not what he was going for, and Ingrid says that he'd better not do it either as he has a history of being violent. We see Odon praying that they don't take Ingrid away from them, and he wonders what's wrong with them all. Ragna sits up, saying that he can go in his stead as well. They all kind of stare at him funny because they know he's directionally challenged. Jackson says if he's going to be scouting in tall fields, and that he needs to pay attention to the changes in the grass, noticing disturbances, and that's the first step to overcoming an ambush. Rem starts chirping up, saying that he told Jackson to stop teaching Ingrid this weird stuff. Ingrid sighs, saying that nobody will prevent them from fighting once he is gone, wondering if it is okay to leave them here, but even he agrees that there's nobody better suited than him. After enlisting, because of his lack of skills, he constantly moved around filling in for other people. The one place he ended up being useful was here. As we see Jackson and Rem both going to attack each other, Ingrid steps in between them, which catches them off guard, and they both stop their attack. He tells them to give it a rest. Rem asks if he's brave or stupid, and Jackson tells him that he should be thanking him, otherwise he'd have a hole in his chest. Ingrid says that they are really skilled, so they can't lose them, and compared to them, he's not much of a loss in combat power. There's no need for this sudden contemplation. He knows where he stands in terms of skills, and that he has a lot of room to improve. We see him walking through the woods with the other scouts as they are heading to the front lines. One of them sees him with his eyes closed and tells him to lock the fuck in, saying that they may both have the same rank, but he's the leader of the scout squad, and if he has a problem, they can fight it out. His name is Andrew Gardner. Somebody else laughs, asking Andrew if he really thought Ingrid would fight him, saying he's an outcast. Andrew begins to smirk, saying that if he does try, he'll make sure not to hurt him, and then he starts flaming him, saying that a squad is only functional because of its members. He tells everybody to listen up, if they meet the enemy, they'll bash their skulls in. Ingrid says they are very loud, asking if they don't understand what scouting means, and that Andrew is too green for this. They spot some tracks on the floor, and Andrew says they are new tracks. New is a type of animal, and he says that they'll follow the tracks and have a barbecue tonight. Ingrid says that new travel in groups of at least 20, and if he's seriously gonna go fight this, wondering what is going on inside his head. Another man starts laughing, saying that's not a gnu but rather a gazelle, and he looks at Incrid, who's glaring at him, and says that Andrew is kind of obnoxious, and his name is Henry. He's previously a hunter and didn't seem to care for the squad lead. He ended up talking to him out of luck, and they became close. Henry talked about the basics of being a hunter, which he thought was very helpful, and Henry talks about how there are usually separate paths for animals in the fields, and he'll tell him more about it tomorrow. At night, we see Andrew saying that it was a gnu for sure, and that he needs results more than anything as Incrid watches. The next day, as the squad heads out to the fields, Andrew says that this is the location that they're supposed to recon. Called Green Pearl, aka the unnecessarily tall grass field, as they all stare at it. Andrew says that they'll cross this field, find the hostile party, and bring them back as prisoners. They say yes, and as they continue, Henry asks if they're really going in here, saying that they're just supposed to scout, and Incrid says that it's the squad lead's command. As they're walking through, Incrid says that it's not that easy, and he thought Andrew would give up soon, but it's not, as this is unexpected. He's not complaining, and he's taking this seriously. Henry notices there aren't many animal droppings, and Incrid asks if that's a problem. Henry says that means that there aren't any animals in a place where food is abundant for them. We see a paw raise into the air and then slam into the ground. Incrid instantly feels a chill on his spine as we see a panther running by him in the grass. He makes eye contact with it and pushes Andrew's head down, telling everybody to stay low. As the panther was running from something else, two people catch strays in the head, and Andrew tells everybody that it's an ambush as we see their ops have pulled up. He calls for them to run, and we see everybody hauling cheeks. One of the men gets held down, and we see them capture Andrew. Henry gets stabbed in the chest, and Incrid turns around, seeing the enemies are closing in, and he can tell based on his senses that he's completely surrounded. Incrid continues to run as we see a crossbow being armed. He hears this, saying that the listening technique he learned from Jackson is definitely helpful as he dodges an arrow from behind, but then he begins to hear way too much sound, saying that he doesn't know what's with all the noise and that in the end, it's only helpful. As we see hella spears coming in, and he is soon impaled, knowing that they were going to be ambushed, it makes sense trying to avoid it. We see him trying to convince Andrew about it, and Andrew asks him if he wants to get his head cut off, and Incrid realizes there's no way they'll listen to what he says, asking if he needs to find a way to make it out alone. We hear him trying to tell everybody that it's an ambush and to run away, and that he tried using a different path to escape, but he was stopped by the enemies once again, and that Henry was killed too. He says it's okay as he can always find another way, and he has the repeating time loops on his side. We see a firing squad pull up, and he catches a whole lot of arrows to the chest. He got caught by 20 or so crossbowmen from the east, and died after being riddled with arrows. He moved north to avoid them, but met a squad of spearmen. We see him grabbing dirt as he slowly crawls after being shot with arrows. Even if he manages to avoid them all, they never stop pursuing him. Their uniforms are dyed green as if they've been preparing for one. He wonders what's there to guard in a field like this in the first place. As he continues crawling, he spots a fire and a flag, and then gets his head clean cut off. As his blood begins to pour out, he wonders what they are hiding here. It jumps back to Andrew, telling everybody that they'll cross this field and bring them back as prisoners. Incrid has heard this a dozen of times, and once they head in, there's no making it out alive. They are definitely hiding something, and he needs to figure out what it is. If he gives that up, he won't have to die. Henry calls out to him, seeing that he's lost in thought, and Incrid realizes that if he tries to avoid it, it means that it'll be the end of the loop. But he decides that there is no running away from this wall. Andrew calls out to him, asking what he's waiting for. One of the members tells Incrid that he knows Andrew is an asshole, but just to go along with it, and that he has his own difficulties. Incrid asks why he would do that, saying that there's a limit to how much bullshit he can tolerate from an idiot. Asking the man if he's tired of kissing Andrew's ass, the man starts to get angry, and Incrid pushes him out of the way, saying that he's no longer playing this game. Andrew goes to draw his blade, asking him if he's disobeying orders, and Incrid realizes he needs to reframe the situation, and tells him he's not disobeying him, rather he's going to be the one giving commands from now on. Andrew starts to get angry, and Incrid explains how he survives the longest, along with the other soldier and Henry. The soldier with the scar on his face is as tough as he looks. He's the most skilled one in the squad, but stays on Andrew's ass, and he's got to be some type of bodyguard or babysitter. Andrew draws his blade, saying that he can try to take command if he can beat him, and tells him to draw his sword. Incrid says a normal soldier wouldn't have a bodyguard, and that he's obviously properly trained by his posture, and that Andrew must be the son of a rich lord, but says if that was the case he wouldn't be so eager for results, and suggests that he is a fallen noble. Andrew says that judging by his pathetic skills, yet high rank, he must be someone who never trains while leeching off money. Incrid says whatever he is, he can't keep following his orders, and Andrew starts to tell him that he's different from him, as he has a mission to fulfill. Incrid starts telling him to come at him, saying that he doesn't know why he's running his mouth so much, and that he's light work. This pisses Andrew off, and he starts to run at him. Incrid says that normally he would struggle against someone like him, but he's obviously being looked down upon, and that his brash actions will lead to carelessness. Andrew thrusts towards Incrid's head, and Incrid uses his hand to deflect it, saying that carelessness is the best chance he has. As Andrew's arm is sent flying backward, he realizes that he made a mistake. Incrid capitalizes on it by getting in close and punching him in the stomach, causing Andrew to spit up and fall to the floor, coughing. His babysitter and Henry are both surprised that it took one punch, as they thought that Incrid was a weakling. Incrid says from now on, the squad is under his command, asking if anybody has issues with this. Henry is speechless, and the babysitter starts thinking about it, and looks down at Andrew, who looks disappointed in himself. The man sighs, and Incrid says that this is the first step. We see them walking through the forest, and they wonder what Incrid is thinking. Incrid then asks Henry what his dream is. Henry is a bit taken aback, and wonders why he's curious, but tells him that he wants to marry a beauty who runs a flower shop. Incrid says for him to do that, he has to survive. Henry asks another man, and he says that he recently became a father. Incrid tells him if he wants to continue being one, he has to survive. This continues, and we learn that one of the soldiers wants to open his own business, and another wants to return home. Incrid asks Andrew, and he says that he wants to fulfill his mother's wish, and that his mission is to revive House Gardner. Incrid says that since they all have dreams to fulfill them, they have to make sure they get out of here alive. He stops walking, and tells them, rather than trying, they will guaranteed make it out of here alive. Everybody is surprised by this, and Incrid says that he needs them to move proactively, as there's nothing more motivating than life itself, and the enemy will soon appear, and he was planning for them to break through. He points towards the grass, telling Henry to shoot an arrow over there, at head height. Henry tries to tell him there's nothing there, but Incrid says he's not repeating himself and to shoot. Henry fires his arrow off, and we see it hit one of the men in the face. The enemies then yell that they are being ambushed, which surprises Henry and the others. Incrid draws his blade, telling Andrew to stay on his ass. Andrew grits his teeth and runs in, and Incrid says that he was wrong, and to fight with the upper hand, they need to find them first and ambush their enemies. As we see him stab one through the back, and then he readies himself for the next one, the enemies start to wonder what's going on and yell to kill them. We see Andrew stab one in the throat. Incrid says they need to take advantage of their confusion to reduce their numbers as much as possible. The reason he brought Andrew was because his bodyguard will follow. We see one of the men going to attack from behind. He instantly gets his head cut off and then cut into pieces by the babysitter. Incrid says this will be the best chance they have. We see Incrid cut one of their arms off, saying that the enemy, which originally numbered 12, has been cut down to 8 people. The rest are coming up, and we see the rest of the boys pull up. Incrid orders them to kill them all. The boys charge forward, dealing with their enemies. Incrid says in a tall grass field like this, the enemy soldiers have a hard time finding their location too. There is one reason they discovered them first. We see the panther running by them. One of the enemies gets jump scared by it and then tries to attack it, but Incrid comes out from the side and stabs the man in the stomach. Incrid says they were chasing the beast the first time around and coincidentally discovered them. This time they failed to notice their ambush because they were focusing on chasing it. Things are going smoothly, so he won't let it die easily. Henry tells them that they have finished, and we see Andrew is gassed out while his babysitter cleans his sword. Incrid tells them they will be moving immediately, while the panther watches him from behind. After one casualty, their unit has 6 people remaining. Even after multiple cycles, it was impossible to save everyone. However, this was the most survivors he had, and he wants to keep pursuing. We see a man watching guard, and he quickly gets his head cut off by Incrid. Incrid says due to the loops, he knows the quantity and locations of the enemy soldiers. If they keep going straight, they will get annihilated by 30 crossbowmen, so they need to turn right here to avoid them. The spearmen who persistently chase them every loop need to be disposed of quickly, or else they will hamper their movements. To avoid the difficult fights, using hit-and-run ambushes, they escape the enemy's encirclement. We see Andrew killing one of the men. His babysitter says he can tell he is overexerting himself. When it is dark, it will be hard to find the exit. They need to escape while the sun is still up. Ingrid tells them they need to keep going forward, and he asks him why he is going further inside. Ingrid tells him he knows it is the right direction and that he won't accept any disagreements, and to follow him. The babysitter looks pissed. Henry is then surprised as we see him pointing his blade at Ingrid, saying that he should act right, and that he has no plans to follow him to his death. Even if he has to kill him now, he is going to find a way to live. Ingrid says that he himself should know it is too late to turn back. After the commotion they made, their retreat path will have already been swarmed by the enemy. The man asks if he should really follow him, and Ingrid says he wants to make one thing clear, that he wants to survive as well. Andrew thought Ingrid would be some useless trash, just like his father who had given up on everything and just wasted the wealth of his house. But that was not the case. In fact, he reminds him of his mother, as we see her telling Andrew that their house may be finished, but even so, she hopes that he becomes somebody who can lead their people. He needs to earn their trust and rebuild their family. Andrew says he has always wanted to be like her. We can tell by Ingrid's eyes that he is someone who paves the way, as he says to trust him and that they will survive. Andrew steps up, saying that he does trust him, and calls Ingrid captain. His babysitter tries to call out to him, but Andrew says that the captain right now is Ingrid, and that a squad follows the orders of its captain. The babysitter is surprised, and Ingrid tells them to crouch down until he gives the signal and to stay close. The first step to escape is to take the initiative and ambush the enemy to break out of their encirclement. The second step, as we see them all sneaking through the grass, they hear the sound of rustling. They see enemy soldiers walking by them, and there are quite a few passing by their location. Ingrid says the critical point he found out after dozens of loops is that only during this exact time and place can they let the enemy pass by them without trying to start a fight, and that this is the only method they have to actually escape. Everybody sits there nervously waiting. Ingrid focuses his best on listening, and once he hears nobody else, the rest nervously anticipate his call. He says that everything has gone according to his plan, and that the final step is after the sun sets and it becomes dark. The reason they always fail to escape this field is clear. Ingrid tells them they have arrived, and Henry says no way. One of the men starts to facepalm, saying after trying so hard, they ended up being at the enemy camp. Ingrid says that the soldiers of Aspen are killing everybody in the field to silence them because they are hiding something in this field that nobody can know about. We see some kind of shrine in the middle of their camp with flags strung high and bones all over. Ingrid wonders what happens when something more important than catching them occurs. He tells the rest it's time to go and that a way for them to escape will definitely appear as they start walking into the camp. The babysitter asks why he's going to set the enemy camp on fire, saying he's out of his mind, and it's not unlikely that they'll get surrounded and killed. Ingrid finally asks his name, thank God. And we learn that his name is Mac. Ingrid warns him that he will not tolerate disobedience. Mac starts barking, and Andrew tells him to be quiet, and instantly starts following Ingrid's movements. Mac says he doesn't need Andrew to tell him, that they won't be able to find their way out with it being so cloudy in the night. They have no choice but to trust the squad leader. We see Ingrid cut into a tent, and Mac thinks that they're done for, but as soon as they head inside, it's empty. Mac finds it suspicious, that he seems to know so much about this camp, and thinks that he's too reckless going through the enemy camp, but oddly enough, they haven't seen a single enemy soldier despite this. Looking back, they are definitely in their camp, so how is this possible? Ingrid tells them to stop as they finally make it to the shrine, and he tells them all to wait here. Ingrid says that he's infiltrated this camp a dozen times. When he first noticed that flag and touched it, the entire base focused their attention on him. He says what the soldiers wanted to hide is that flag, and protecting that flag is their main objective. He wonders what will happen when the base catches fire. Mac wonders how the hell he knew that the flag was already here, and then starts cooking up a misunderstanding, wondering if the ferry commander told him this, saying that she was the one who appointed this nobody here. Ingrid says that the soldiers will be too busy protecting the flag. The reason why he suddenly took over control of the squad and infiltrated the encampment, maybe it was all to complete a secret mission. Ingrid says that they'll escape while that is going on, and that they'll split into two groups from now on. One group will be bait, drawing the enemies, and the other will start the fire. Mac says he'll be with the bait group, and Ingrid is surprised, saying that he's complained constantly but now he's suddenly cooperative, but decides it's better for him. He's dragged the squad into the encampment many times, however he's never had this many people with him until now. Ingrid says that today is the best loop he's had so far, and he thinks that it'll be doable. One of them catches a rock to the head. Then they spot Mac running away and yell to alert the rest, and they start chasing after him. Incrid says that he will succeed. We see him reach towards one of the torches, and he says that this is their best bet at moving to tomorrow, but out of nowhere, an absolute unit appears beside him, and swings down with an ass ton of force, cutting the torch in half. Cold chills runs down Incrid's spine, and he says he didn't even notice this dude. Incrid goes to draw his blade and says he's never seen this guy in any of his other loops, but he can tell this dude is a fucking menace, and he wonders where somebody so strong has come from. The man glares at him, calling him a rat, and Incrid says that they're late. The man wonders what he's talking about, and looks over to see a fire on one of the tents. Some robed guy comes out yelling about it, and then we see the boys running off with barrels. The man tells everybody to put the fires out. Incrid explains that Mac baited away most of the enemies, and he got the attention of the rest while Andrew set the tents on fire. Now he just needs to escape. He stomps his foot on the ground, saying all attacks start from this as he prepares for a thrust. He says to kick against the ground to propel his body forward, and go for the gap in this man's defense as he starts thrusting his sword towards the man while he is distracted. The man instantly turns his head around, locking eyes with Incrid, and then avoids the attack with no wasted movements. He instantly gets behind Incrid before he could even react. Incrid realizes this is bad as he just got cut on his stomach. He leans over, holding onto it, and says that was the best stab he could have done. He turns back and looks at the man who calls him weak, and Incrid can feel the sheer gap in skill, saying that he can't beat him, at least not at his current skill. He barely managed to get here after all of the ambushes through the fields, loop by loop, with everybody dying except for him. He finally thought he had beaten the challenges of this loop and could continue, but now he realizes that this man is the real wall of this loop. As the man raises his sword, Incrid says that if he's going to die, then he says that then he'll have to take over the control of the squad and repeat this over and over to get the chance to fight this man. He begins to laugh, which surprises the man at first. Then he starts to get pissed, asking him why he's laughing. Incrid points his sword at him while smiling, and the man says that he's going to cut him up and feed him to the dogs and starts to swing at Incrid. Incrid lowers his stance and readies his weapon, saying that he will overcome this wall. Incrid manages to block the attack as we see sparks flying from their collision. The man starts to parry his attack, causing it to slide down his blade. Incrid is surprised. The man takes the chance to go in for a quick follow-up and swings. Incrid sidesteps it, but the man is relentless as he instantly goes for another. Incrid manages to dodge that too, surprised that he swung from that position. But the man's onslaught isn't over. Incrid looks up at the blade and somehow manages to block it. He can feel the power behind it. He realizes that he has no opportunity to counterattack. There's too huge of a gap in terms of skill. Incrid does his best to create some distance and takes out one of his throwing knives, launching it towards the man. As it gets close, the man simply raises his arm to deflect it with the back of his hand. Incrid didn't expect that. The man instantly closes the gap once more, stabbing straight for Incrid's chest. He hears his men yelling about the fire spreading, and we see the blade go by Incrid's face as the man was distracted. All over the shrine is now on fire, and it is heading towards the flag. The robed man from earlier calls out to his commander, asking if he doesn't understand what's at stake here. The commander realizes that Incrid won't go down without a fight, and that he has no fear in his eyes. He calls out to him, telling him that he will see him again, and begins to walk away. Incrid is surprised that he's backing off so easily, wondering if maybe he was not the true wall, saying that even if he wasn't, he'll need to overcome this loop, and that he can still improve from here. He hears Andrew calling out to him, saying that they need to go now. Incrid turns back to glance at the commander, as Andrew continues yelling. The commander turns, making eye contact with Incrid who wants to fight him, but instead sheathes his blade, realizing that the best call here is to escape with their lives. And he yells to retreat as we see the men doing their best to put out the fire on the shrine. They start to alert everybody for help. As the boys run out, Incrid says, one of the guys who went that way disappeared, and there are only 5 of them left in the squad now. Mac asks if this is all, and if they are going to send a pursuit force after them. Incrid says no. They hear Henry coughing, and as he's beginning to slow down, a small group of soldiers begins to chase after them. The boys instantly turn to defend Henry, and Incrid finishes his enemy by cutting his head off. Max stabs one in the throat, and Andrew copies Incrid. Incrid tells the rest not to hesitate and keep running. As we see Andrew grab onto Henry, he says that they won't be able to follow them if they keep running towards the habitat of the field fox and snake. Andrew asks if that will make it harder for them too, and Henry smiles, saying that he knows a safe route, the hunter's path. Incrid tells him that he trusts him to guide them properly. As they get deeper through the field, Ingrid says he no longer hears the footsteps of the pursuit party behind them. As we see them running, we see a fox watching over them. Thanks to Andrew and Mac's efforts, they were able to get rid of them pretty easily. If it wasn't for Henry's pathfinding, they wouldn't have been able to lose them quickly either. It took the efforts of every squad member to get this far. The sun begins to rise, and Ingrid blocks the light with his eyes as he looks up, seeing that he has made it to the next day. They continue running through the fields, making it back to their camp. One of the men asks what happened to them. As we see them all bloodied and gassed out, Henry says he feels like he's about to pass out. Then we hear him slump onto the floor. Ingrid cracks his back, saying that he's finally got through that loop, with most of them alive. Now he can continue his days. It jumps to the shrine as we see the flag is still intact, but that everything else is damaged. One of the men asks the robed guy what happened, and he says that they need to prepare it again. He didn't expect the famous Grey Dog to be unable to stop a few small fry. As we see one of the company commanders named Grey Dog, he says he can't understand what happened, as the soldiers stationed here were the best of the best. Yet a few enemy soldiers broke through, set fire, and escaped. The Grey Dog is an independent company, pretty much private contractors. It is derived from the Grey Dog that resides within the Principality of Aspen. Having a persistent temperament, it has a need to connect with whatever target it has decided upon. Whether it be alone or in a war, therefore the company with the name of Grey Dog is also called the Persistent Lovers. Yeah, I don't get what they're doing with this one. Grey Dog asked the man from earlier if the one he faced was strong, and we learn that his name is Mitch Hurrier. I hardly know her. Mitch says if it wasn't for the fire, he would have easily finished him off. Grey Dog says he got lucky then, and that luck is a skill in itself. Mitch tells him that it will not happen again, and we see Ingrid inside his tent, saying that it bugs him that he faced that wall but couldn't get over it, and that he wanted to keep fighting him. And Ingrid says that soon eventually they'll have to fight again, as we see Mitch as well, determined to kill him the next time they meet. We see Rem throwing his axe through the air, saying that he's bored as hell and that Ingrid should be returning from the recon soon, wondering why there's no news from him. He catches his axe and sits up in the bed, wondering if maybe he died. He says while he got better recently, he's still a small fry, so it would not be surprising if he did. It doesn't happen often, but he actually liked him, and sighs, saying that there's nothing he can do if he's dead. We see Ragnar waking up as well, and he looks over at Rem, who's in a weird pose, and he asks him what the hell he's staring at. Rem waves good morning to him, and Ragnar returns with his own wave. Rem begins to grin, saying that he thinks he wants to kill him, while holding onto his axes. Ragnar starts to unsheath his blade, calling him a crazy dog. It jumps to the ferry company leader. She starts asking Ingrid about his scout mission, asking how he happened to burn the whole place down. He tells her that he continued to make the best possible choices in that situation and got lucky. She makes eye contact with him while saying the words lucky, and then says, "Alright," telling him to rest and recover. She had hoped that he would achieve something, but she didn't expect anything this big, wondering who exactly he is. As Ingrid goes to leave, he says that he has no idea what she's thinking. We see Andrew calling out to him and then bowing, saying that he's sorry for acting out in the beginning, and he's alive, thanks to him. Wondering if they'll meet again. Ingrid waves, saying that maybe if their paths cross, and he begins to walk away. Andrew grabs his sword and bows to Ingrid, and the rest follow his lead, paying their respects. He says that he managed to bring back 4 of them but wonders if that was really his best, saying that he ended up losing 2 of the members and if he were a little stronger, he would have saved them too. With all the loops, he is capable of exceeding his limits. Eventually, he'll be done with his desperate struggling and strive towards his true goal of becoming a knight. He'll use his loops as a stepping stone for just that purpose, and to prevent repeating the same day over and over, he needs to become much stronger. He hears his squad yelling that they're back at it again, and we see sparks flying as both Ragnar and Rem are trading blow for blow. Both of them are making very serious expressions compared to when they usually duel, and Ingrid says he's never seen this before. He sparred with them countless times yet never seen them make this expression. One of the men says that they aren't even human, calling them animals, and Ingrid says he guesses that they never needed to go all out against him. So he needs to get his priorities straight, and that he needs to have them make those same faces when he spars them. We see Ragnar blocking Rem's attack, and then he glances over, spotting Ingrid. Rem tells him that he's got to report back to them if he's home, asking why he's hiding again. He starts yelling at the rest, saying if they're not going to fight him, then to run off. Ragnar comments on Ingrid being injured, and he tells him that it's just a little scratch. Ingrid goes to ask about their techniques, but Rem instantly tells him to just go wash up and rest. Ingrid decides to ask Ragnar about it instead, asking the same thing, and Ragna asks if he's seriously asking this right now, and Incrid asks if it's a bad time. Ragna turns his head, saying it's nothing, and Incrid says it sounds like he has something to say but decides he'll tell him later if he wants to. We see everybody packing up the tents as the battalion commander began to move the entire group closer to the tall grass field. Incrid's wounds healed significantly through the trip, and he constantly reflected on his entrained. We see the red-haired guy asking him if he's training, and saying that they're moving out tomorrow, asking why he doesn't rest. He tells him that he'll just be going out for a little bit. Rem clicks his tongue, saying that if he keeps doing this, he's going to die soon and he needs to rest. The next morning, Ragna wakes up to the sound of somebody swinging their sword and sees Incrid's bed is already made and that he must be training. He starts stretching and grabs his sword, saying that he is good with his sword and getting stronger wasn't difficult, and he had a chance to become a knight. But we see him saying that it was boring and that there's nothing he wanted to do as a knight, asking why he would spend his time and energy on it. That he couldn't find meaning, so he lost his purpose, and that's why he's here in this squad. He begins to watch Incrid swing his sword. We hear Incrid grunting in pain as he swings and falls to his knees as we see that he still hasn't fully recovered from his fight. Ragna comments on how his fundamentals are all wrong, and that you need to learn them properly when you start. With all the shortcuts to make up for his shitty fundamentals, it'll be impossible for him to get stronger. But Incrid grabs his sword, and we see his eyes are full of determination, and Ragna wonders why he's putting his body through so much pain, trying so hard. He decides to ask him the same question, and Incrid tells him it's because he wants to get stronger. Ragna asks what he'll do when he does, and Incrid tells him that he'll become a knight. Ragna tells him that a knight is just somebody who fights well, asking if it has that much meaning to him. Incrid says that the knight he aspires to be is someone who decides for himself what is right, and raises his sword for honor, for the sick and the poor, and to protect those he loves. Ragna is surprised that he's doing it for honor and merit, and says that strength is just a tool, since a knight is just a sword, and starts to think about what he wants to do. He walks forward, saying that he won't know until he figures it out, and he calls out to Incrid, asking him if he would like to learn the sword. Incrid says of course. And then Ragna stares at him blankly, and sighs, saying that he should not have said that, and he's already getting lazy. But still, based on how determined Incrid looks, it might be interesting. He says that Rem already taught him the intestines of the beast or something, right? Incrid corrects him, saying it's called the heart of the beast. Ragna says that he needs to get rid of anything that is not that or his stab. Incrid asked about the Valen mercenary sword technique. And he says, especially that if he doesn't ditch that, even if he learns a new technique, he will revert to his old habits, and in that case, he might as well give up. And he tells him to choose, either ditch everything, and start fresh, or just be complacent. Incrid instantly says that he'll start fresh, and Ragna, surprised by how fast he replied, asking him if he's sure about this. And Incrid asked what he needs to do first. Ragna says that this guy really is not normal. And while he has a good physique, he wields too light of a weapon, and he should find something heavier, and hands him his blade. Incrid asks if he should really be handing his sword over like that. And Ragna says it doesn't matter as it's not special, and tells him how to properly grip the sword by having his right hand above his left. He then notices he's squeezing tightly, asking why. Incrid says so he doesn't lose his blade. And Ragna asks him who taught him this. And he says Rem did. Ragna clicks his tongue, calling him a useless bastard, and tells him to get into his position. He then raises the sword above his head, and swings it down on Incrid. He blocks it, and we can see his hands shaking. And he says that shit hurt, asking why he did that. Ragna says of course it would hurt. And if he stiffens up, it's only going to get worse, and says he's essentially like a branch or a column or something like that. Incrid wonders why everybody in his squad talks like this, asking if that's a metaphor, and what that's even meant to mean. He wonders if it means that he's too stiff because he's clenching the sword too tightly. Incrid says he probably means to say that he needs to stay flexible with the sword to keep his sword from breaking, and he needs his movements to be more malleable. He then loosens his grip, and then we hear Ragna slash his sword a couple more times. And then he kicks Incrid's feet out from under him, telling him to pay attention to his balance. Incrid tries again, and he asks him where his feet are pointed. And then smacks his sword, saying it's too stiff, telling him to try again, asking him if he's trying to break his wrist. We see Incrid go for an attack, and Ragna taunts him, asking if he was trying to dance. This continues on throughout the day until we see Incrid on the ground. Ragna sighs, saying he did not realize it was this shit, and that Incrid has none of the basics down, and that it's not something that can be taught. We see Incrid gassed out, but he tightens the grip on his sword. Ragna stares at him, and then thinks about something. And Incred asks if they can go again. Ragna sighs, and draws his blade, telling him that they should start with the baby steps. We then hear Rem asking where they have been all day, asking if they are playing picnic here, skipping meals and shit. And he points at Ragna, asking Incred if he's giving him a hard time, asking if he wants him to take care of him. They start their typical banter, and Incred asks if there's something going on, because Rem is dressed up. Rem tells him that it's because they're being summoned. As the enemy forces are gathering in the distance, we see everybody preparing for combat. And it jumps to the ferry commander standing on a cliff above all the soldiers, as well as Incred's entire squad suited up for battle. Ragna wonders if teaching him was a mistake, saying that he's still new to the technique so he probably can't fight all that well. And then he might die because of that today. He puts his sword on his shoulder, saying that he's definitely going to need to babysit him today. Incred wishes that he had more time to practice. Some of the soldiers start asking why the enemy's formation looks like that. As we see that flag from the camp, and that they are all spread out in a very specific pattern. As the robed man stretches his hand out, saying this is the end. A strong gust of wind suddenly starts to form from where he's standing. And the ferry commander realizes that it's a spell. All the soldiers fight to maintain their posture as a fog envelops everybody. Incred looks around, saying he can't even see the people next to him. A lot of the soldiers start to panic due to the fog, and Incred hears something. All the other soldiers hear it too, and wonder what that noise is. They start to panic, and Incred yells, telling them all that it's arrows. As we see them coming down like rain. They start impaling the soldiers, hitting them all over. The fairy queen starts to deflect them, saying the fog is not normal, and nobody could have expected them to use this tactic. She yells, telling everybody to raise their shields. And she realizes they've been had. The robed man begins to laugh, saying it was so difficult to get this spell together. He had to offer up the blood of many animals, while collecting a ton of water by casting rain spells. And once the spell is active, the fog will obscure all vision. Unless you're under the casting point of the spell, which is the flags, it's going to be a one-sided battle. And he calls it the fog of annihilation. We hear Mitch telling him that he looks satisfied. The man says of course, if it wasn't for that flag almost burning down, this would have been a cakewalk. And Mitch thinks about Incred, calling him an asshole, as we see him doing his best to endure the arrows. If you've watched till the end, comment, Banshee, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.